morning. Good morning. So we are here. It's Sunday, January 29th at Unity of Springfield, and this is our Adult Education New Thought World Religion class. I am Amy Burnett, and I am your current board president here at Unity, and I will be hosting the discussion this morning. Oh, Brandy, whatever happened just caused feedback. We will be talking about Michael Singer's book, Living Untethered, Beyond the Human Predicament. And so this is a follow-up to his book, The Untethered Soul, which is one of my all-time favorites that we've done. We did a book study here at Unity on The Untethered Soul, and it just, like I said, it's just been one of my favorites. So when I saw that he came out with Living Untethered, it's like, I must read that. I also wanted to tell you guys, I always try to tell a little bit about how I come to a topic or whatever. And so this was an interesting one. Like I said, I was actually looking for books to send to someone who is needing some reading material. And as I was doing that, that's when I thought, I was like, oh, The Untethered Soul. I should send that and see if they'll read it and we can talk about it. And in looking that up is when I saw Living Untethered and was like, immediately must purchase that and put it on my reading list. Well, then a little bit of time passed and we came into the white stone ceremony, burning bowl and white stone. And I just wanted to share my white stone experience because I think that, you know, Sue talks about people feeling pressured in that moment, like it must come to you right then and there. And so I'll just tell you, during White Stone this year, as we were meditating, I had all of these concepts like flooding in my head, but there was no word that was bringing them all together. It was just all of this stuff. And so when the meditation was done, I didn't have anything written on my stone. And I think that's a first for me, that I didn't have something written on the stone at the end of the meditation. And Lisa looked at me and said, "What's your word?" And I said, it's not there. It didn't come. And she was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, it'll come later. And as we were singing the closing song, I stood up, and as I stood up, untethered came in my head. And it was like, oh, yes, untethered. Not only is that my word for the year, but that's the book for that's what I need to do the next Sunday on. So just those things I just like to tell. I think the more we hear those stories of how things happen for people, the more we can allow those things to happen for ourselves. So that's me sharing how that unfolded for me this year. This is also one of the first books, just because I think Michael Singer there's so much, and he says one thing, and I need to think about it for an hour. Like I read one sentence and I need to think about that sentence for an hour, or it keeps coming into my mind. So this is, I think, the first one that I'm just going to start out saying, like, this is a multiple parter here, because I did not want to shortcut and try to cram it all in to one session. Wanted us to be able to talk about it and really sit in some of the things that he was saying. So he starts out by talking about conscious awareness, and this is a concept we talk about at Unity a lot. I just thought, again, some of the ways that he puts it into perspective are really powerful and really deep. And so he talks about living untethered, that we're embarking on a journey into the sheer reasonableness of acceptance and the great gifts it promises: freedom, peace, and inner enlightenment. And that acceptance is best understood as non-resistance to reality. So he says, you know, try as we may, we can't make an event that has already happened not have happened. We can't make an event that has already happened happen any differently than it already happened. We don't have the power to do that. So our only choice is to either accept the event or resist it. And there is born all of our action in response to that event, right? So he also talks about that on a daily basis, we're distracted by external objects, and we rarely remain centered on the you, with the capital Y, the conscious receiver of these objects. And so this was a really interesting thing to think about. And so I wanted us to like go through this together and just really sit in it for a minute. So if someone came up to you and said, "Hi, are you in there? Are you in there?" Well, of course you're in there, right? You can't respond if there's no you that's in there. But what does that mean? And so he says, think about when you were 10 years old and you looked in a mirror. Did you see what you would see today looking in a mirror? Did you physically see what you would see today?
No way.
No. But wasn't it you inside who was looking at that image? So again, when you were 20, when you looked in the mirror at 20, did it look the same as it looked when you were 10? Does it look the same as it would look today? For most, I was thinking the room would be okay, like 20 would be a safe number. We would all be past that.
30
today. 30 could have been a safe number today. But so it's different than what it was when you were 10. It's different than what you would see today. But the entire time, it's been the you inside looking at that outward image. And that was a powerful thing to think about, that each day when you look in that mirror, when you're looking to the outside world, things have changed, things are different. It's not the same. But there is an eternal you on the inside that is always the one looking and observing.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
I'll try my best. Went to a film festival in town a few years ago, and they had one of the artists took a photo of himself looking in the mirror every day for 365 days, just 1 year, and then put it in fast motion, and it was unbelievable the changes that went on in that amount of time, just 1 year.
Yes. I saw one recently that it was, today's kids that know nothing but technology. It was a guy, and I think he started at like age 10, and he had done until he was 18, and he had a time lapse of a photo every day from like 10 to 18. It's crazy. It may have even been past 18, but it was like it took 10 minutes or something to watch the whole thing, but it was so fascinating to watch him go, and that he had this idea at that age and then actually kept up with it the entire time. Like he was so committed to this project at such a young age, and then just did it from that point on. And he has this whole slideshow watching himself change and grow day by day. It's very interesting. I've never had the commitment to a project like that. I would probably start it and get a month in and then be like, yeah, okay, yeah, I did that. So I'm fascinated by people who like have the drive that like that was such an important thing. Like he knew it was going to be impactful if he could keep doing it every day and make it to the end. And it is. I mean, thousands of people have watched it. Hundreds of thousands of people, I think, have watched it at this point because it is fascinating to see. You think things don't change that much day by day, but when you put it in something like that and you watch, you see how much we do change in very short spans of time when you think about it from the greater perspective. So he says, so from that point of view, so from thinking about that you inside of you is always the observer and you're seeing these physical changes. From that point of view, how old are you? Not how old is your body, not how old is the outside that you're observing, but how old is the you inside?
21.
So, he says, how old are you? The you that's in there looking out through these eyes at this body. If you were in there when you were 10, if you were in there when you were 20, if you're going to be in there on your deathbed noticing that you're dying, then what age are you in there? And that's not necessarily a question to answer, just thinking about that on a deep level. And thinking about when you were 10 and maybe having experiences or awarenesses that we're older than maybe a 10-year-old brain would be expected to have. Is that an indication that the you living inside of this body is not in fact 10 years old? It's 10 years old in this experience of this human body, but there's more, there's something bigger there. And so he says, are you willing to let go of traditional concepts about your age? And I really was thinking about that, and I thought, oh, like this is, you know, how many phrases do we have? Like, young at heart, and you know, all these things to talk about how, you know, people express that, you know, when I look in the mirror, I see this body that has aged to this many years, and there's like a societal expectation of what it looks like to be that many years old in your physical body and what you should be doing. But how many times do we hear people saying, I don't feel that age? Like there's something inside me that feels more youthful or more daring than my human body is allowing, or whatever. And so I just really, that made me think a lot about that. Yeah, LB.
The last Greg Braden book I read, he was talking about two people that he had met that were over 120. And he said that one was in a monastery in Tibet. And he said, you know, he was walking beside this lady. The guide had put him with her. And they talked. And afterwards he asked him. And they said, well, she's over 120. So he asked this other person how old he was. And they don't keep track of age. They don't think about it. So he had to go back. He knew when he was born, and he actually had to sit there and calculate, and it was like 90-something, you know. And Greg said, they're not conscious of age. They don't age, partially because they're not thinking about it all the time and thinking about what you're supposed to be when you're 60, what you're supposed to be when you're 70. And he quotes this one guy that was celebrated by the Chinese army. He went in the army when he was 90. And he died when he was 256. And this was in 1934 or something that he died. And so it's all documented. And he says, you know, it's our mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many stories that come out. Like, there's the one lady, and I can't remember, I think she is in her 80s or 90s, and she still does like her gymnastics routines from when she was a teenager. She's, there's videos of her like on the parallel bars, and she's doing the things. Now, some of the things she has to modify a little bit, but she has still got the strength and the stamina to do all of these things. I'm always enthralled. Like, I always watch her videos whenever they come up on anything, because I celebrate that she has, you know, released the physical age of her body and keeps it going with those things. It's interesting you say that. I also just saw something the other day, and it was an interview with Prince before his death, and he was saying the same thing. Someone asked something about his age, and he said, well, the thing is, I quit counting birthdays a long time ago. And when I quit counting birthdays, I quit counting time. And when I quit paying attention to time, it allowed me to look and act like I did 10 years, like I still look like as good as I did 10 years ago. And, you know, but that was his whole thing, was if we're always counting down that clock and counting to the next birthday, then we get locked into, well, time is passing. And if time is passing, then all these things have to happen. And so being able to accept that there is a you inside of us that is not bound by time in that same way, is a really big release and acceptance. So that's the letting go of those traditional concepts about age. And so he says, the question remains, who are you? So who is that you in you? The awareness that intuitively knows that you're in there. Your body has an age, and your body has a gender, but those concepts are irrelevant to the one who notices the body. And so I thought this was interesting too. You know, he says, if you look at a tall 100-year-old vase, does that make you tall and 100 years old? No. The truest same of race. It may be a certain color, but the consciousness that notices this has no color at all. You are not your body. You are the one who notices the characteristics of your body. And so he says he talks about if you woke up tomorrow and you got out of the shower and you caught a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, and your gender was different and your skin color was different, would it change anything about the you that is seeing that? He said, now, of course, you might immediately think, oh my gosh, what has happened? How did this occur? This is different. I've never seen this before when I look in the mirror. But you would be that observer having those thoughts about how did this happen to this physical body, not changing anything about he calls that you inside the seat of self. So it wouldn't alter the seat of self in that moment. It would just be a change in the physical on the outside. And so he continues to talk about that we are the subject and all the rest are just objects of consciousness. So the subject within is that you, and everything else are just descriptors in this physical plane. So he says now, if we've established that there's a you in there, it would be reasonable to ask, what do you do in there? What is it like in there? And he said, if people answered honestly, most people would say, it's not always fun in there. It's not always a walk in the park in there, right? Like we often have stuff going on that we are aware of within our seat of self and things that maybe no one else sees. We're kind of dealing with that on our own. I saw again this week the image where it shows an iceberg, and an iceberg, like 90% of an iceberg is underwater. So what you're seeing above water is just the tip of the iceberg. Like it's one of those things. Yeah.
So you're talking about the actual you, the real you, and I don't think the mind that is thinking when I go inside of myself and hear my mind, that can't be me either. When you say go inside and you're listening inside to what's inside, I'm listening to myself talking to myself about this world and this life and everything. But when I go to the real me could never be worried or upset, or the real me knows it's all a done deal. Life is wonderful. Life is eternal. Life is good. It's just the game I'm playing, no matter how horrific it might look. It's just a game.
Yes. And so thank you, Wendy, for putting that in, so that the second part that you were talking about, that inner peace, that you that's not worried about what's going on, that's what he's calling the seat of soul. So that's the true remembering that you are connected and not that this physical world and this physical body truly have very little meaning in relation to that complete inner. So those other things are, yes, our thoughts, and he gets into that a little bit too, that we can be fooled by our thoughts into thinking that they're coming from the you, but they're really a product of our outside world. So he says, when we get down to the real honest discussion about inner growth, most people don't realize that it could always be nice in there. So if you take the nicest it's ever felt, and he says, think of something really joyous, like holding your first child, or the day of your wedding, or just something that just made you feel completely at peace and full of joy. And recall that state. And he says, and then you have to increase it multifold, and have it be that way all the time to truly know what it would feel like to sit in the seat of soul, that it would be the most blissful feeling. That is the, leaders have talked about, of being that complete inner peace, that nirvana feeling, that complete connectedness. But he says, but we have so much stuff in this physical realm that we often can't see the truth, and that we could be experiencing that inside, that it is really beautiful in there all the time. But he said it's kind of like something's messed it up. So he said if you walked into a house that has dirt and banana peels on the floor and pizza crust on the counter and dishes piled in the sink and all of that, you may not realize what a beautiful house you have walked into, because all you see is that clutter and the stuff that's not so appealing. But if someone took care of it and cleaned all that stuff out, it could be the most beautiful house you've ever seen again. But you have to do work. That takes work. It doesn't just happen. And so we've talked about that before. And he says that's the situation inside of you. It's why you go on this inner exploration, because you're shooing away all the banana peels to get to that inner spot where we can know that we are connected to divine mind. So he says the problem is we often ask how to make it nice in there, but the more relevant question is, why is it not nice in there? And so he says when you ask how to make it nice, you are usually trying to use the outside world to fix the problems or fix the whatever you see that needs to be changed. But if you find out why it's not nice to begin with, then you really start doing that inner work. Does anyone have any thoughts there? Yeah.
Here you go, Rick.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. It's, well, like, let's see, like, I'm 57, and I say, I'm 57, but I feel like I'm 22 or whatever. It'd be like a 22-year-old from the 80s. It wouldn't be like a 22-year-old of today. And if I woke up and was like a 47-year-old Samoan woman or something like that, I think it would affect my you. Like, not that day, but I think after a month or two, the you would be sort of different. There's just a whole different set of reactions, feelings about things. I think that would, like, not that day, but yeah, over time, if you woke up as a totally other kind of person, I think it would affect the you. And
So would it affect, do you think it would affect the ego part of us that is tied to the outside world and what's going on, but the eternal you on the inside?
would it affect that? I'm going to go with yes. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes. And then, I don't know, unlike Prince, I don't know, I like to play with numbers and time. I don't like, on March 21st, it's going to be 3-2-1-2-3 day. I don't know, I do stuff like that. And I know that at the end of this year, it's going to be 1-2-3-1-2-3 day.
Yes, I saw that the other day too.
So I don't, those are my thoughts for the moment, just throwing them out there.
Yeah, so December 31st, the date will be 1-2-3-1-2-3.
You want it on?
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Don't give me these. I'm 77. I don't have all this time. I was going to say how we're kind of looking at how the present is affected by the wrapping.
Oh, how the present is affected by the wrapping. Okay, that was a good analogy.
A couple entendres mixed in.
Yes. Don?
I was just reading last night a book that was determining the difference between the brain and the soul. many people say that our essence is in here, and he's taking exception to this idea, because if there is something that the brain can do, that's fine. It can think, it can reason, it can even create things. But the soul cannot commune. The soul cannot know something he has never been taught. He cannot say anything, or he cannot know something that nobody told him. The brain can't do that. The brain has to have input, and it receives and sends messages to different parts of the body also. And the soul has nothing to do with that. But the soul has a totally different function in us. And I'm beginning to wonder if there's a difference between soul and spirit, but I haven't worked that one out yet.
Well, let us know when you get it when you get it all figured out, Dawn.
Yeah.
You let us know.
When you were talking about it, the thing that came to my mind as far as like the big you was when I was very little. I mean, I remember, and of course all kids do this, this idea of proprioception, like where is my body in space, and like staring at your hand and just, you know, being fascinated by this is my hand, this is this thing that I have. And I mean, I remember doing that a lot when I was a kid, and not labeling that this is a hand necessarily, but just being fascinated by sort of this idea of proprioception and perceiving my body, but not labeling that. To me, that's sort of the you looking at that in a way, like trying, you know, just seeing that without labels.
Yes. That's one of the examples he uses also, is he says, you know, if you, maybe not the gender and changing your racial identity, but like if you had an accident and you lose a hand, so you've lost a part of this physical body, but does it change the you inside? And he was saying, you know, if we were our body, then losing a piece of that body would have to drastically change who we were, because we would have lost a chunk of who we are. So it's another interesting thing. And I'm with you, Carrie. Like, I remember as a kid, I used to drive my mom crazy because of the questions I would come and ask. And I remember when I had an awareness that like things are only the label that they are because somebody decided that's what label they will be, and everybody bought into it. And so I can remember sitting and thinking, well, why is a horse and not a dog? If somebody had decided to call that animal a dog, then it would be a dog to everybody, and then this would be a horse. And my mom was like, stop thinking about things and go outside and play. She's like, you're going to drive yourself crazy. But I remember thinking like that and that's the you inside, having that awareness that like, okay, this physical place that I'm living in is not
arbitrary.
Yes, like there's parts of it that are arbitrary. Yeah, Wendy.
Yeah, hang on. I wanted to say one thing too. The word that I was really focusing on when we're talking about all this, and I really loved what everybody said, is the word unchangeable. You know, if you go deeper and deeper and deeper into who you are, you get to a point where it's unchangeable. Isn't that what we're really concentrating on?
Eternal is the word. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go before we all started talking, and I'm probably not going to say it the same way you did, but it was kind of like you were going, once you understand this is where the work begins, or you said something like that, to that nature. And I've been studying metaphysics since '89, and there was a lot of work to study metaphysics, to understand it, to get into it and stuff. But the further along I go, and the further I begin to know who I am, express from who I am, I have to stop doing the work. That's the journey at it, is to stop doing the work and to trust the whole process that you're doing. Like, I didn't choose, It wasn't my ego that chose to come here and express as female human being Wendy. It was the whole of me that chose this. And this is wonderful. And why am I fighting human being girl Wendy? Why don't I just live out the joy of what I have chosen? And so the goal for me at this point is to stop the struggle, stop the fight, stop trying to become something. I already am. And just enjoy what I've chosen.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah. So I'm going to use that in a minute when we get... so he says the three things that we're experiencing in there are the outside world coming in through our senses. So we're getting that all the time, right? Being bombarded with things from the outside world. And then our thoughts and feelings or emotions. And so he calls that the three-ring circus. He says that's what it can feel like. As you're constantly, you've got the things happening in the outside world, then you have the thoughts that you're having about those things, which then creates emotions about the thoughts about the things. And if you are not having awareness that that's what's happening, then you're just caught up in that cycle and being pulled from one thing to the other. And so he said it's much like a three-ring circus in your consciousness. And he says, you know, the outside world has a major influence on your thoughts and emotions, or on your thoughts. Your emotions will generally line up with your thoughts. And he said, so you rarely have an instance where something truly awful is happening in the outside world and you're thinking, oh, this is the best day ever. Like, no, right? Like something's happening. You're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. And what am I going to do? And then when you start having those thoughts, then the emotions fall into line with that, because you also can't be having all of those thoughts screaming at you in your head without having some kind of emotion come up for that. And he says, you know, of course, we all want our thoughts to be positive, uplifting, and beautiful all the time. The problem is there's this outside world of reality that can cause that to be difficult. But what really matters is not those thoughts, emotions in the outside world, but the you who is experiencing the things. And he's like, again, that's what Jesus was talking about. That's what Buddha was talking about. That's what all of our great teachers have been talking about, is the seat of self, or the kingdom within you. Like, that is, if you're in that place, then none of this other stuff it matters or is important. And I think that's where Wendy's going too, is like, if you're truly living from that space, then you don't have to get caught up in what to do with the outside world stuff and the thoughts and they're just not even touching that inner part of you. Yeah,
It's interesting when that lines up. When my truck was hit, and as it's rolling over, when it's upside down, I'm going, this is my truck. And when it stopped, because it hit a chain link fence and it was upright, my thought was, I only have to do that once. Because my dad had me on carnival rides, and you had to go 4, 5, 6 times before you... And I was so present, and I was so peaceful. And there were already like 3 people standing at the, truck going, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I just got off a carnival ride. It was kind of, interesting. And everything was just amazing. So when you're in that space, it is so cool. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I was going to say, for what you were saying about naming the animals, C.S. Lewis's Narnian books, he explores kind of that, and they're really fascinating if you've never read them.
I have, but it's been a while.
Yeah, what he explores, how things got named and that kind of thing, and it's just kind of, it's interesting because every language is a different name for whatever it is.
Yes. I saw it, again, I've been on social media too much and watching too many Reels videos, it sounds like, but one of the other ones that I watched recently that was really interesting was, it was a couple, and he is from the United States, she is from Poland, and they were doing animal sounds in different countries, like how, like what did you grow up learning that a cow sounds like? And it was really, some of them were very similar and some of them were so different. You're like, are you listening to the same animal? But it was just kind of cool to see, how that transpires too. So he says, you are in there, and you in there is a very great being made in the image of God. But to know that, you have to free yourself from all the inner commotion. And so what is your nature? What's it like to sit back and be conscious of being conscious? And he says that's what spirituality is all about, is when we're no longer distracted by those three great distractors, we can't be pulled in by those objects. And that once you become to understand the nature of those objects that you're struggling with, you'll naturally be able to release the hold they have on you. And this act of letting go is what he means when he says acceptance or surrender. That there is a great state of peace within you that cannot be disturbed by the world, your thoughts, or even your emotions. That these objects can continue to freely exist, but they no longer dominate your life. And you will be free to fully interact with life, but you will do so out of a sense of love and service rather than fear or desire. And I think that's exactly what Wendy was trying to talk about there, is that, that's what he says too, is we should be in awe every moment of every day of how the universe has conspired to bring us into this moment in this physical body with the seat of self inside us, to have these experiences, and just, whatever that day brings, whatever that moment brings, we should just sit in awe that it's happening and that we're here to experience, and that we've chosen this experience as well. Sorry, I'm trying to edit because I'm looking at time. So he also says, though, that even though all of that has come together, the moment in front of you right now has absolutely nothing to do with you at the same time, right? So it's how you're experiencing it. And all of these things had to come together to make this moment happen, but it didn't necessarily come together only for you. And so this is his, he says, before you disagree, take a moment to look at the moment in front of you. Don't do anything with it. Don't meditate on it. Don't try to be positive about it. Just notice that it's there. Now look to the left. There's another moment over there in front of you. Look to the right. There's yet another moment. And those moments were there before you decided to look at them. And they'll still be there when you're done looking at them and you walk away. He says, how many moments exist in the world right now that you are not looking at? How about in the entire universe? So we have to admit that those moments have nothing to do with us. They belong to themselves and their relationship to all that surrounds them. You didn't create them. You don't make them come and go. They're just there. So the moment in front of you is just another moment in the universe that exists, even when you're not looking at it. So it is completely impersonal.
And that moment is coming from within. So, for example, Don just recently got hearing aids, and he has put those in, and he's just he'll walk across the room, and he goes, I can hear my shoelaces, I can hear my, she said to us, she said, a lot of people get hearing aids, and they're just this is horrible, and so they don't wear them. But you have to wear them long enough that you attune and tune out all the things that are not what you want to pay attention to. And we do that all the time. There is more, we only see a fraction that we allow ourselves to tune into. And then when we change our consciousness, we see more that was already there. And every one of us is seeing a different world sitting here.
Yes.
And it's the same thing where if you don't stay long enough to attune to it,
It's the same way if you don't stay long enough and attune to it, like the hearing aid, those other worlds too go, it's rejected. You reject it real fast and you don't wear your hearing aids.
We call it overstimulation.
Overstimulation.
Okay. And so he says, all moments in the universe are simply moments in the universe, and you are the one who's bringing your personal preference to these impersonal moments and making them seem personal to you.
The other point I was going to make is that when you look to the left, to that other moment, then when you're paying attention to it, then you start to co-create with it.
Your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we start to make that moment
So you're
personal to us because we're observing
focusing
it.
on it.
Yeah. So this is the next thing I'm going to say is one that since I read it, this is one of those things that keeps, like in quiet moments, it pops up in my brain and I haven't been able to let this thought go. So he says, one of the most amazing things you will ever realize is that the moment in front of you is not bothering you. You are bothering yourself about the moment in front of you. It's not personal. You are making it personal. It's one of those things that, like, you know, but then you hear it in a different way. And so since I read that, I've in these moments, like when I'm at work and I'm starting to feel frustrated and I'm like, oh, this person. And then I'm like, no, it's not the moment in front of me that's bothering me. It's me that's bothering me about the moment in front of me. Like, what do I need to change about how I'm thinking or how I'm experiencing this? Because this, the world is not conspiring against me in this moment. This person is not conspiring against me, and that they're not trying to irritate me. They didn't wake up this morning saying, let me think of 10 ways I can really frustrate Amy today. Or when we, how many times do we have, I don't know, I was thinking about like technology issues. Have you ever talked to your computer? Have you ever talked to your phone? Like, why are you doing this today? Like, we want to put this personal attachment into that moment, right? That, like, for some reason, this moment was created just to get under our skin, when we're getting under our own skin. It's our perception and our thoughts about what's going on that is creating this bothersome moment, because it's just a thing that is occurring, and we could think about it 10 different ways and have 10 different responses, or infinite number of responses. So that's Michael Singer's gift to you as well this week. Is when you're feeling bothered, remember that it's not the moment in front of you that's bothering you. It's you that's bothering you about the moment in front of you. Yes?
I was late, and I apologize, but Michael Singer just does it for me. He's so down to earth and just like cuts the right notes. So I was listening to all this going, oh, it sounds like Michael. So when you just said that, but I was thinking when you're talking about material and what's in front of us, but then there's that other part where our energy actually affects this material world around us and what we attract and repel by how we're thinking and interacting with it, So your computer, or you go out and interact with somebody in some way that, I don't know, I was just thinking how literally the material world is a vibratory field interacting with ours, and we actually create also the material breakdown or reaction of computers. And if you get up and you're having a bad day and everything's this bad thing, your computer goes bad, your car won't start, all of it.
Electronics are really sensitive to that.
Yes. Okay, you're doing great. We're gonna go through. Okay, I know Paul starts to look at me when it's about 10 o'clock. We start to think, So he also talks about scientists explain the creation of the universe as the Big Bang, and so he goes into this very in depth, and it was very interesting. The way that science explains that Big Bang and how then atoms and elements and things came together and the creation of all things that we know. And so I'm not going to go into all that depth, but just know that it's in there, and it is quite interesting if you want to pick this book up and read it. I think he did a really good job of explaining it in terms that made sense for the topic that we're discussing. So this occurrence some 13.8 billion years ago led to the formation of all the matter that we now experience. So the elements that now make up the world we live in were forged in the stars, including those that make up a human body. So he talks about the fact that The elements that make up a human body have been proven by science to originate from this event, this Big Bang, the stars. And so, in essence, our physical bodies are created of the stars. Like, this is something that we've heard before. And he says, so that explains where our physical bodies came from. It explains where the physical outside world that we are currently experiencing comes from. But then he does also talk about how the way our brain interprets what's in front of us and how it converts it into colors and images and shapes, that's very interesting also, and that we could all be, depending on how it's converting, like Wendy said, we're all experiencing a different world sitting here. We could be looking at the same thing and seeing something different. And also, as they experience, or as science looks at what things exist in the universe that the human eye cannot interpret, we learn that there's all this other stuff going on that we don't even pay attention to, kind of like that hearing aid analogy maybe, that our equipment is designed to help us tune in to certain frequencies and certain things that are going on in our physical world, and to tune out other things. But now science is going, oh, wait, we got curious about this, and now we've found this thing, that we now have equipment that allows us to see this thing that's always been there, but our human eyes weren't equipped to see it until we had this other thing to view. Anyway, getting real meta there. I'm sorry, but it got me excited when I was reading all of this. And I always, some of you may have heard me say it before, like sometimes when I'm reading these books and things, I feel like the Grinch, where, his heart grew 27 sizes that day or something. Like, I always feel like I just feel the expansion of things, and then I have to sit with it for a while.
Well, I get excited about what you're talking about because I remember reading the Superman comic books as a kid and remembering I can't say his name because his name was only consonants, but he came from the fourth dimension, which it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
I just wanted to point out it's 0.0035% is what the human eye can see in terms of the light spectrum.
Yes.
Wow.
0.00. I had to look it up because I was like, I know it's a really, really small number.
Yeah.
0.0035% is what we can see. So.
Yeah. So then you think about that. So we're walking through.
What does your mom get? Your mom can see more than that. I know that.
So anyway, so he says all of that explains again where our human body came from, but it doesn't explain where the you inside the human body came from.
Right.
And so he says that you has not been determined to be made from atoms. Our body, this physical body, has been, shown to be the result of the long process of Darwinian evolution. Mm-hmm. But what about the you in there? Where did it come from? How did it get there? Why is it the way it is in there? And so that is what he says that's what we're exploring when we're exploring spirituality, is really trying to dig deep and figure out where did that come from? So he's saying when you surrender and accept that idea that the you inside of you is timeless, and you're not surrendering to the outside world, you're just accepting it. You're accepting that it is how it is and how the experience that your eternal self is having. So he says what you're really surrendering is your personal made-up judgment of it. Mm-hmm. And so he says, if you were asked whether it's okay with you that Saturn has rings, you would probably say, sure. I don't care. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. That's kind of a silly question. But he says the truth is everything is that way. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the forces that caused it to be that way. And those forces stretch back billions of years. And so the acceptance of this truth is total surrender. You let go of that part of you that thinks it has a right to dislike or like the result of billions of years of interactions. So that is, again, and I think when you surrender it, you get back to what Wendy was talking about. If you surrender that and you're like, it's not really up to me to like or dislike this, like I can just sit in the joy of having the experience and play with the principles, play with all of that in a way that feels good to that inner part of me now.
Like
I don't think I said that
you
well,
feel
but
a float trip in the river rather than swimming against the current.
yes,
That's a good analogy.
That's good. I like analogies. Thank you. Those will stick in my head all week.
Repeat that for the people online.
So Greg says it's like
Float trip.
being
You
on a
just
float trip.
steer and play with the currents
Yes.
around you.
Instead of swimming upstream.
So instead of swimming upstream, you're guiding the vessel and playing with being in tune
The
with the
13
water.
billion
and,
years of river.
yes. So we're if we're being like that, we're in our kayak or in our canoe and we're going through and we're experiencing what has taken 13.8 billion years to create, and we're just like, oh, that's cool, and we just kind of go with it, versus trying to fight against it or figure out. Maybe get so obsessed with, well, why is that rock right there?
Oh, damn
and
it.
why did it have to bend in this direction? If we just go, oh, well, that's cool. That rock happens to be there, and so I'm going to choose not to crash into it. I'm going to navigate around it. Oh, it bends here. That's really interesting. Yeah, Wendy.
Just a little bit for my own understanding and everything is, as long as I'm worried about the rock being there, my experience is going to recreate the rock there. But I have to not care about the rock being there now and what I created before. But I totally, you look at Richard Bartlett and you look at some of the work they're doing and some of the things that I've done. I can change past, future. I can change now. I can do anything in this physical arena, but I can't do it by looking at what I've made and making that my focus. I have to focus on what I want next.
In a summary, maybe it's the difference between attention versus intention. You can cast your attention and your energy on something and choose it and fixate on it, or you can be intentional about something else, anything else. It's just a process of choosing.
Okay. So where we're going to land today is with him saying, remember that you're not surrendering life, you're surrendering your resistance to life. And that we can use the term mindfulness to mean that you're always conscious of what is really going on around you and inside you. You're not just conscious of the appearance of things, but also their true nature, where they come from, why they are what they are, what it took for them to manifest before you. And from now on, everywhere you are and everything you interact with, be sure to say thank you. Be sure to pay tribute to the stars that created all that you are experiencing. They're not just romantic things twinkling in the night sky. They are the furnaces of the universe. And so he talks about that, science, when it talks about the Big Bang and that explosion of matter, and how many millions of years it took for things, the heat of that was so intense that it took millions of years for it to cool off enough for then life to be, things to form and matter to come together. So that's what he says, they're the furnaces of the universe. They've created everything for you. So we must thank them. We must appreciate this truth and understand that you didn't do anything to deserve the trees, the ocean, and the sky. At this point, you may not even know where you came from, but you are in there experiencing this amazing gift unfolding before you. And that is enough. So that is where we're going to end today. I thought we weren't going to get to the end of it, so I got real nervous. So we'll take this up. I can't remember the next date that I'm here, but we'll do another section from this then. And if anyone, I forgot to show it, I think. If you can see that, if anyone wants to pick it up, that's what the cover looks like, is Living Untethered. And if you haven't read The Untethered Soul, it's really amazing also. You can also, Michael Singer, he has done like Super Soul Sunday several times. There's other discussions that he's been part of. You can get on, YouTube or something and see lots of videos, and he's really interesting to listen to as well. Like hearing things in his own voice is really, really nice.
Thank you so much, Amy. Do you have any other comments?
I had one, just a little share. I had the Grace, which is my go-to. And I had the chance that life took me to near his, so I've been able to go to the Temple of the Universe a couple of times and be around him. But one of the things that I love about him is he doesn't want to be a teacher. He doesn't think of himself as a teacher. He didn't want to be an author. They don't do a lot of internet stuff. They do a little bit of, like he did Oprah. That was the first and only time he had ever done any interview with anybody after he wrote, I don't know if that's the Surrender Experiment or the Untethered Soul or his two biggest before this. And then, but he has talks. So if you go to the templeoftheuniverse.org, or I think it is, they have talks. He does talks every Sunday, at their gathering they have every week. He does a talk and they tape that and they put a new one on. So there's 3 on there every week, and one goes off, and 2 stay, so the one goes off and the new one goes on, and they don't archive them, they don't put them out anywhere, they don't sell stuff, it's like, who's there, if you want it, plug in,
Well, I thought it was interesting, one of the clips that I watched of him with Oprah, when she was talking about living untethered, and she said, so, why now? Why did you decide to do a follow-up to The Untethered Soul? And his response was, well, I'm a firm believer that people shouldn't write books unless they have something to say. And I've been thinking about it for a while, and I had something to say. I was like, that's perfect.
Great answer.
He's like, it finally was like, nope, there's a book there, and I need to get it out. But he's like, I don't sit and think of the next book I'm going to write. Only if something comes to me that's important enough to say. It's very nice. All right, thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for joining us online or watching later. Do we have announcements this morning? Thank you. Just in, hot off the presses. So Drum Circle will meet this Thursday, February 2nd at 6:30. And then monthly on the first Thursday of every month. Everyone is invited. If you have questions, see Zach Miller or Dee Dee Darman. I'll tell you, Lisa and I participated New Year's Eve, and we had never participated in a drum circle before. We came intending to watch, and that was not what happened. we were strongly encouraged to join the circle. It was a lot of fun. And so I say to you, if you've never been to one, but it sounds intriguing, come, and you will have fun. Even if all you do is shake a little maraca or something. The YOU is hosting a pancake breakfast next Sunday, February 5th, starting at 9. Your love offerings are welcome as the teens raise money to attend Raleigh this summer, so that will mean no adult education class next Sunday, so we'll be here enjoying pancakes together. Many hands make light work. We're recruiting for a Sunday morning production team. Your commitment would be 1 Sunday a month, working with slides or live stream. Lisa and Kat can put together step-by-step directions and give training. On Saturday, February 4th at 10, Sue is going to be sharing a congregational visioning. The focus will be tapping into the superconscious mind to allow divine ideas to present themselves to create outside-the-box avenues of income for Unity of Springfield to thrive well into the future. And I think that Sue's going to tell us more about that today as well. And just a reminder that we are available to more good than we've ever experienced, imagined, manifested, or expressed before.
You're here.
All right, thank you.